Welcome back to the show, everybody. As promised, part two of the Quincy Jones, our new favorite developer in the space, and our conversation that we had. And I don't mind telling you, we talk about OTC sales. We talk about the order books on the secondary retail market exchanges being bought out potentially, and many, many other incredible points of discussion when it comes to XRP and potential retail bubbles as well, and what it could mean to the institutional side of the use of XRP, as well as regulation clarity and many other things. This is going to be a great conversation. Let's go ahead and roll that beautiful intro. Here we go.
This is Digital Perspectives with Brad Kimes. Subscribe for new content notifications. Now, here's Brad Kimes. Come on in.
Welcome back to the show, everybody. You can follow me on Twitter at @BackupBradleyAbove at the top of the screen and everything that we're talking about here today. I'm getting ready to play for you part two of the Quincy Jones interview, and you're going to want every single bit of it. This young man is extremely bright, and he has some incredible insights and perspectives about this space and XRP, and we're going to hear them in just a second. Right now, I want you to hear from Blake Skadron from iTrust Capital and all the incredible things that have been happening with that company, and this is why I tell you about it. Check it out. All right, we are back here with Blake Skadron from iTrust Capital. Blake, how are you?
Doing excellent, Brad. How are you?
I'm doing great, and I'm reading great things about what you guys are doing. Did I see this right? You guys have $1.5 billion in trade volume this past year?
That's so far this year alone. And in fact, we are coming up here on our 2-year anniversary. July 8th is 2 years from our go live date of our platform. And we have surpassed now $2 billion of total trade volume since our initial launch. To put that into a little more perspective of the growth that we've experienced. So May 2021, last month, we did $611 million in trade volume. 1 year ago, May 2020, we did 6.6 million. So we've seen essentially 100x increase in 12 months.
I don't think there's anything else I need to say. I think that's, I got to be honest, I think that speaks for itself. Blake Skadron from iTrust Capital. Click the link in the description and the comment box. Check out all the latest specials and deals. Besides that, that is a trusted, vetted link. Be careful what you click on out here, everybody. Blake, thank you for stopping by.
Brad, thank you.
Thank you. There we have it. Now we're going to get on to the Quincy Jones interview. Well, the moment has come, and I love the smell of crypto in the morning. Me too. Let's go ahead and get this fired up for you right now. And let me see where we're at here. I just want to make sure I got a proper, I don't want to skip anything for you guys. And I believe we're right about here. But here we go. I believe we're right here. So just give it a little overlap here. And this is the rest of the interview. And I hope you guys enjoyed, again, some really incredible discussions about the possible path forward and what things may be in front of us yet to come. Let's listen.
Influence, but there's that third party, I guess you could say.
So let's talk about, let's shift a little bit here, right? And we know that, there are a lot of entities around the world that are customers with Ripple and plan and intend on using XRP. And we mentioned one earlier, which was SBI. And they're going to have a major impact, I believe, on the use of XRP. And they just had some news recently where they've hooked together SBI and another bank using a money tap solution, if my memory serves me right. Days are getting long. But I will say, what do you make of price, right? When we get the clarity, when we get the legislative regulatory clarity, what happens to XRP price in your mind?
So I'm actually kind of one of those people that you'll actually see, or at least I believe you'll see, I guess there's two sort of scenarios here, I guess you could go about. And I don't typically like to go into price. So let's call this the future mean demand of the S curve that we're going to see in XRP.
Well said.
Because I can't necessarily tell you what price that's going to be. I can't even, who knows, but I can tell you that I do believe that there will be a overall there will be like where we are when it comes to the supply and demand curve for the overall use case of XRP is pretty freaking low in regards to what can be done and what the future demand may be of it. So I do think that with regulatory clarity, you'll start seeing kind of like the horses ready to run in a sense. And I think you'll actually see more of a pricing in of the price way before you see any clear clarity. So let's say you have like the SEC lawsuit and that gets cleared up. And then let's say you have not another lawsuit, but let's say there's some other court ruling on how you can issue decentralized securities or whatever, and that's cleared up. Well, I think XRP is almost going to operate in such a manner to where you'll see price movement not solely, but primarily based off of economic policies instituted by the financial institutions that are going to be using it, or the economic policies that affect the financial institutions are going to be a direct effect of what's going to happen to the price. And it's literally the demand thing. So and this is why I say there's two different solutions. So if the Federal Reserve just came out and said, we're all moving to the Fed Now system, everything that, you've done before, we're all ISO, this is how it is, then you could see something incredibly dramatic. But at the same time, you could see, even in the span of a couple months or a couple years, and I'm not saying that that's how long it's going to take. I just don't know how long or how it's going to take. But you may see over the span of a period of time, almost like a bull run of a series of announcements coming out, clarifying certain use cases of not just XRP, but this would be use cases for the entire space. So one thing I like to say too is a lot of people look at just XRP. I like to look at some of the like XRP and the ISO coins as just the ISO coins, because everything that has to do with that the economic policy is going to affect the ISO coins directly. Now you're going to have other coins that are going to be affected too peripherally, just because they're a part of the same asset class. But when I explicitly are talking about like dramatic movements in regards to economic policy, I'm talking about ISO coins explicitly, XRP, XDC, and Algorand. And can you forgive me if I'm wrong, but I don't know if there are any others. I know there are others that are sort of like trying to make a weird migration in a sense, but nothing definitive. Because I've heard Cardano, but I haven't seen anything definitive on that. And I've heard of a couple others, but I haven't seen anything definitive. But when I talk about any sort of dramatic movement or any sort of economic policy that can affect that type of dramatic movement, I think you're going to see it entirely, almost like I said, almost like a bull run. It could be a month, 3 months, a year, but it's going to essentially be a series of economic policies that will clear up the overall use case. And I think what's happening too is it's not going to be dramatic. What's going to happen is, and I said this on Crypto Eerie before, is I think you're going to see more and more businesses carry it on their balance sheets, and it's more of a risk reward thing. So they can still use a good portion of the use case and a good portion of the liquidity, even if it was only 2% of their balance sheet. But as they get more and more clarity, that 2% can become 5%, that 5% can become 10%, and maybe they may level off at 20%. Who knows what it is? But the whole point is I don't doubt that a lot of these companies may use it. I just think that a lot of them are really just like we are, just like how we like. I cannot even can't even go into like it's one of those things where I've like rattled off for like 2 hours about how great the technology is just to get a response back of, yeah, so I think we're gonna have to bring in some lawyers and bring in like some regulatory and maybe even bring in some licensed literally, yeah. So I'm like, oh, this would be great, and they're like, yeah, like, we got to bring in all this structural business stuff to make sure everything's legally sound. And I think that's the biggest thing that's holding XRP back now from a lot of the adoption it could have from a lot of the businesses that I think are already using it, because there's nothing stopping you from using it. It's just a real question of how much can you use it and in a capacity that's safe. And that's why I say if they're only using 1% or even a fraction of percent of their balance sheet to maintain liquid processes, it's a lot more safe than using like 50% and then issuing securities or treasuries or doing exchange. It gets significantly more complex the more you do with the software. But I do believe the more I think that not only financial, the more clarity we have in the space as a whole will be good for the entire space, but the more clarity we have in regards to regulations around how you issue assets, how you treat securities, bonds, treasuries, commodities, futures contracts, option contracts, all that. That's going to be those like almost one of those hardcore Wall Street fundamental like policies that's really going to determine the overall price. And it's not going to be entirely instant. You may see price get factored in before the announcement. You may see a lag after the announcement. It all depends on that adoption curve of not people, but really just different organizations and companies saying, okay, how much more can I dive into this space without essentially getting my hand chopped off because I went literally just like how Ripple is in right now. How do I make sure I'm able to navigate this? And that's something too, you got to remember, a lot of these companies are basically going like, well, what we're doing is already pretty good, but obviously some companies are willing to change sooner than the other ones are. So it's an exponential effect where you have the early adopter companies that get in first, and then since they're operating on the platform, the companies that they work with now start operating on the platform so they can interoperate with them, and then it's a cascading effect. But the first domino to fall has to be regulatory clarity, not just on the asset class as a whole, but on how you manage those financial instruments on these platforms. Because that's from a perspective of somebody who deals with the macroeconomics and the software development portion. I can tell you right now, a lot of people and a lot of companies are not going to make a move because they feel like they may not have the clarity needed from those securities, equities, bonds, all those that may be on the network, because there's really nothing to be said about that. Yeah. And that's the thing. I think one thing that may actually expedite all of this is, and I'm pretty sure you're very familiar with Tether, but if Tether implodes, you may see an exponential regulatory I don't even know how to put it. You may see a huge movement for regulatory clarity to make sure that assets are properly backed by the equity that's supposed to back them, and they're properly transferred in the legal manner that they need to be suitable for the broader economic landscape that they're residing in.
I think that's an excellent point. USD Tether could very well be a catalyst for legislation and then regulatory framework to come into play. I certainly believe that is lying in the grass. It could certainly become that. Now, when I think about all of this and what you're talking about in this adoption and getting the clarity and companies beginning to come off the sideline and use these things, hold it on their balance sheet, begin to use it in their business models, however it works for them in the most efficient way, you have to think about what's left on the secondary market. I mean, a good portion of the retail investor is locked out from getting it. And I mean, God bless Uphold, and you can trade into it on BitTrue. But, when the businesses get the clarity, they're going to know that the cheapest XRP that's still floating around out here is on that secondary market exchanges that we shop on.
Yep. Yeah, you're right. Because the OTC market's going to lose its mind because they know they could very easily make a ton of money off these, because that's the thing, they need to do bulk orders. So they're not going to do a bulk order at some, especially when they need it. Like, of course, everything you're saying is entirely on point. Like,
they're going to buy out the order books on the secondary exchanges to get as much of it because it'll always be worth more tomorrow than it was right now today. That to me is like a short squeeze. It's going to the upside, right?
It is because it's what's going to end up happening is, and I tried to say this before, but I don't know if I articulated this on some of the other channels. So either A, you're going to see the supply shrink while the overall demand stays the same, and you'll see the price shoot up. Or you'll see the demand shoot up. This is all depending on how much clarity happens in a certain period of time. If you see a ton of clarity happen in a week, you may see all this happen at once. But if you see clarity happen over the course of a year, then it may be an ongoing process. But either you're going to see the supply shrink up, causing the price to go through the roof, or you're going to see the demand get ramped up so quickly that anybody operating on the OTC market is going to offer it up as a markup, meaning that they're going to go to the exchanges to buy, but they're going to buy it at that. It's going to be a markup, but not as high as the OTC markup. And they need to buy it in bulk. So it's not so much going to be nuts, but it's going to be a bit of a utility bull run frenzy. And from my perspective.
No, I totally understand. And, I go back to, when you go back in the early part of the SEC complaint in that filing, interestingly enough, myself and Mr. B XRP, digital asset investor, Dustin Planholt from Lifestyle Media, and a handful of others were lucky enough to be invited to Swell 2019. That was in, I believe, November of that year that they had that in Singapore, and that was an amazing event to be able to attend. I'm very grateful for being able to attend that event. And I had a chance to talk with David Schwartz over the course of 2.5 days.
That is so cool. You got a chance to speak with David Schwartz?
He was amazing. I mean, he really was. I mean, he is as brilliant as he seems anywhere else. It's just amazing. But he also is very gracious to people like myself who are not coders and developers, but I can seem to follow down the path pretty well, right? But look back on is that was in November, and the tolling agreements between the SEC, the agreements to try to get a settlement before being sued, right, between Ripple and them started in April of 2019, if my memory serves me right. And it was in October, I believe, when David Schwartz offered the idea that you can now launch stable coins off of the XRP ledger. And then I thought, wow, I had these conversations with Big Skinny, and I'm like, I've always been talking about a bond market, and he's like, XRP could be looked at like a bearer bond, right? You've got this anonymity because there's the digital address to the wallet and the token, but you don't know who it is that has it, so you're protecting the deep, clear anonymity of who the entity is, right? So it's interesting when I look at these things and I say to myself, wow, was that the groundwork? Because now we have Gary Gensler at the SEC, Quincy, and he's been very clear and upfront about the fact that he believes the majority of these cryptos out here are in fact securities. And he's even gone as far as to say he believes XRP is a security, and that then I start thinking, okay, well, if we go down that path, then you could see I could come up with a way for that to work, because you could have XRP be like a bond. You could do a stable coin issuance off of the bond. The banks are just as good for holding the bond. The bond can still go up in price, right, and still gain in value. But if we bring a certain level of assets, as you mentioned, from all these different areas of industry, commodities, dollars, real estate, all these different things on the ledger to represent this value. And we're settling transactions by crossing these different industries to take a very balanced approach at how we do it. I remember back to Singapore where, like, David Schwartz had said to myself and a couple others, he's like, if you think about it, the only way for everything, if everything was to fail, it wouldn't be just bad for the network. It would mean the end of the world, because this is a decentralized exchange that is the intention is to have every asset of value, money or not, on this network.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think one thing to bring up, this is also part of the reason why I think they're going to bring up a whole new different type of crypto will be an asset class, but then there'll be a series of different types of crypto that'll be their own sub asset classes. Why I believe that, because it's one of those things where, so let's look at XRP as a bearer bond, right? Well, what does that make like Algorand then? Being able to issue smart contracts and being able to programmatically be able to delineate those different assets, like it becomes this weird, and that's the thing, they're not all the same. So like, Algorand smart contracts aren't the same as XDC smart contracts, that aren't the same as Ethereum smart contracts, that aren't the same as name whatever platform you want to put in. They're not exactly the same. They may do the same similar functions and they may have features that are quite similar, but they don't do it quite the same. And I think that's going to be the biggest thing that runs up against the wall, is they could go, okay, cool, we could put this crypto in a box that is this, because that mirrors this financial instrument. But then they still have the question of, well, what do we do with all of these that are just like it but don't really fit in the box? And I feel like there are too many of those to even. I think they're like, that's why I say liquidity tokens and smart contract platforms, and there may be even more sophisticated names come up in the future for stuff like that. But I think they're really going to be. I think they're going to be boxed in based off of their utility, and that box is going to have a specific set of rules attached to it in regards to regulation. Because I don't think how the current financial instruments are regulated now. I don't think you can apply that same level of regulation to the crypto assets. The biggest reasons is because this is a global protocol. So you're practically operating everything over the internet. And there are ways that it's not the biggest deal that you wouldn't be able to track this. It's more of what happens if I sell a security in the United States to somebody overseas, and then they sell that to somebody else overseas. And it becomes this weird, how do you actually go about managing something like that? And I think that's the real question to be had, rather than like I don't think it's going to fit perfectly in a box that's already been created, like I said, but it's gonna. I think they're gonna make new boxes when it comes to it. But that's something too. When it comes to regulatory clarity, I think they're also gonna really outline what is, because I don't doubt that some of these cryptos out here may be securities. And actually, before I even get into that, this is sort of a plug, but Gary Gensler's entire MIT class is on YouTube the entire semester. I've literally watched through the whole thing. I love it. I highly recommend you guys go check it out. I highly recommend going over the banking portions, the payment portions, intro to blockchain, and potential. I'm pretty sure there's something talking about utility. Go through it. If I would highly recommend if you could watch all of it, but go through it. And he does talk about how he talks about how a lot of these are different, can be considered securities. And he talks about the different ways of how different projects were started where we looked at as securities. Like right off the bat, any ICO from a layman's perspective could be considered a security. Now, this comes down into the utility of it and those boxes I was telling you before. But sort of in that layman term, there is a weird conundrum in which how we define securities and these different type of financial assets. But as a whole, I do think we're going to create a whole new different type of asset class. They'll be regulated in their own right. You might even see an international, like a cooperation agreement to try to get different, regulators globally to try to be able to manage, something like that. I wouldn't be surprised, and I wouldn't be surprised if that was also tied into how ISOs manage too. But in a general sense, I do think that that the assets themselves can be considered a lot of things. And I do think some are going to come out as securities. Like, I think one of the big ones that you could give an example to, and Gary Gensler gave an example for this too, is Filecoin. So when Filecoin got first released, it was released as a white paper, did its raise, created the project, and then released it. And you may go, well, Filecoin is just like any other crypto. But the thing about Filecoin is the functional utility of it's great. But you could still almost argue that, not that it's a security, but the manner that you went about it is a security, and the utility doesn't necessarily hold it. It doesn't necessarily hold it in a realm to where you could not necessarily argue that it's something else. It's just in a weird box that doesn't necessarily have a place to go. But it does have the organization around it, the push, and the fact that it was raised before anything was published out. And that's a lot of the issues with a lot of the other ICOs. But a lot of the other ICOs might try to get out of that with their utility. Ethereum's doing that right now. Ethereum's trying to say, well, we're decentralized. We have this much decentralization. We're this big. We've outgrown this idea of being potentially a security. And that may be one of the requirements that you may have to register as a security and then grow to a certain size to no longer be considered a security. But there are a bunch of different ways and that's the thing, there are like 10,000 cryptos out there. So there's going to be a ton of different ways to go about. And that doesn't mean there's going to be 10,000 different ways to manage the cryptos, but there could be easily 10, 20 different, asset management criteria in regards to how they go around regulating the crypto space.
I mean, to your point, Quincy, I think of Hester Peirce's 3-year safe harbor rule that she has proposed, right? And how that gives companies and projects that 3 years to kind of figure out where they live in all of this. Mm-hmm. I think about Gary Gensler and really saying, hey, the majority of this market really is just really digital asset securities. Mm-hmm. And I've heard him say plenty of times in the MIT classes, the fact that these things have a little bit of utility really doesn't mean a lot to him.
Yeah,
right?
That's what I was trying to say about Filecoin. It's like, it has a little bit of utility in which you're able to manage like cloud files and be able to get kind of like a cloud or be able to get a blockchain level of file management on a decentralized platform. But at the end of the day, they could still consider it a security. And that's the thing, part of the reason why they may still consider it a security is because of you got the Filecoin software that's able to, and this isn't just for Filecoin, it's just for any of them, but you got the software that operates in a certain capacity. It was released in a certain capacity. And this is what they're trying to come after Ripple for. And mostly because Ripple is the most involved. And this kind of is going to be one of the biggest problems with most of crypto projects where one person or one entity is primarily involved. And it's hard to get out of that too. It's one of those things where, like, how do you become decentralized if you can't find other people to work with you? So especially if you're the first one to show up to the party. So it's like, there's a huge, weird gray area in this. And it seems as if there's going to be a lot of winners and losers. And there's almost no way you could pick and choose. It's almost like Gary Gensler is going to be the one who has to pick and choose. But at the end of the day, I do believe even if they do get considered securities, treasury, bearer bonds, whatever, the fundamental utility is still going to have a demand curve on it. So It may be different. it may be different because of the classification, and there may be certain constraints, or there may be certain supply constraints because you may have, like I said, you may have to have licenses to own it or possess it, or you may have to have certain regulatory criteria to even engage with it. But at the end of the day, they're still going to do what they're built to do.
Don't you feel like, I mean, isn't it a bit of semantics almost? I mean, it's like, I don't believe they're going to hurt the full scale intended use no matter what they designate it as. And I feel like whatever designation they choose, they're going to do whatever they need to give it the ability to function at its full scale intended use, just as long as if it's a currency, it doesn't challenge the sovereign government currencies of the world, right?
And I think, sorry.
Oh, no, and I was just going to say, and if they go with a bond-like kind of approach, they make sure that through that approach, it's not able to challenge a currency. And maybe it's a currency everywhere else in the world because it already is, but it's a bond here. So it can never quite challenge the world's money if it's a bond in the largest economy of the world, right? So we'll see.
I think what's gonna happen that's quite interesting is I do think you may see a handful of like full intended cryptocurrencies that are treated almost like global currencies. Mm-hmm. And you'll see fiat currencies issued on top of these, like CBDCs and such. And people may be going, but wouldn't that be counterintuitive to fiat? And you got to remember, fiat isn't really a thing. It's an idea. It's a representation. It's a representation of value. That's really what it is. And so when it comes down to that representation, what's the difference between there being a piece of paper or it being on the distributed ledger?
Exactly.
And so it's one of those things too, where I feel like a lot of these, and you see a lot of like Bitcoin people try to say this, that it's like trying to take over the dollar. But I think a lot of these currencies aren't going to do any of that. They're going to operate almost in tandem with fiat to essentially run the fiat systems a lot more efficient and a lot more liquid than they otherwise would have, on top of a series of automations that people can interconnect with based off of the independent needs of the enterprise.
To build on your point, going back to 1944 and the introduction of the Bancor coin from John Maynard Keynes, this neutral bridge asset looking at XRP today can serve as what that idea was then, because the technology and the decentralized exchange now exist to be able to provide that structure for that. And then you could really keep the harmful national economic shocks from being a spillover to all the other dollars because of that neutral bridge asset in between. Exactly. That, correct?
The economies of the governments that issue their fiat currencies will essentially have their economic problems isolated from the rest of the world. Exactly. So other economies and other countries and businesses that operate within those other economies and broader economies don't necessarily have to share the overall risk of being able. So if if there was an economic crisis in, let's say Mexico or whatever, and you essentially were partially tied to the U.S. peso or the Mexican peso because you need to have so many pesos on hand to be able to facilitate trade. Well, you're in a huge world of hurt due to the economic conditions of Mexico. Now, let's say you're an American company and you may have a good portion of your balance sheets in dollars, but you also have a good portion of it in XRP. Well, what ends up happening is when you end up doing that international business, you don't need to hold the currency of the country that you're doing business in. And that saves so much risk because one, it's slow, it's expensive. Almost every global billion-dollar global enterprise has almost essentially a separate department in regards to dealing with international payments in whatever location that they're running their enterprise in. You can see this with Uber, Google, Amazon. They essentially have entire departments with hundreds of people in them, basically administering payments to make sure that each payment in each currency in each country that they're residing in is able to be entirely interoperable with their app. And that means they have to deal with each country's banking system, each country's whatever rules and said. It becomes a exponentially growing problem the more you try to expand your business. And now, if you were using something like XRP, I could essentially create a application that could operate on the internet, be essentially spent in US dollars, launch it overseas, and then be able to allow the people to use their local currency by issuing, not even really issuing, but by using that XRP to issue their local currency and not necessarily have to go through a broader exchange process through the banking system and there's different ways you could do this. You could go through rippling and find a CBDC of their local currency. You can go over, this is actually quite interesting, and I highly recommend people going to David Swartz's channel to look this up, but you can actually issue CBDCs yourself as a representation of value for people to spend. So if I had an XRP and you had US dollars and you wanted to send 5 Japanese yen to your friend, well, I could just take the value of my XRP, issue 5 Japanese yen. And not really 5 Japanese yen, they're just a representation of the yen paired to the capital value of the XRP, issue that, and then pay back the overall value that I issued out with the dollars at a tiny spread. So let's say it was $5 to issue it and the spread was 10 cents. I made 10 cents basically being able to engage that trade while at the same time being able to do it instantly. Exactly. So you get that instant payment international. This is why international payments is huge. That is a very tiny scaled version of what I believe the entire planet's going to be operating off of.
I really do too. Yeah, I do too. And just to add to this, I want to build on your point that you're making here. I just covered again, and I've covered it on the channel a couple times before, one of the big 4 accounting consulting firms is Deloitte. Mm-hmm. And a handful.
That's like a meme at my job, to Deloitte.
Yeah, really? So there's one of the top 4, and they did a report a few years ago where they broke down Bitcoin, XRP, the SDR with the IMF, and the best way to introduce a global reserve cryptocurrency to the world. I'm going to show you what they said their recommendation was right now, Quincy, and let's go ahead and take a look.
Was it the SDR?
And this is what they said. The strongest possible driver, can you see this?
Yeah, I can see it.
Yeah, the strongest possible driver for national adoption of a cryptocurrency is for the national government to mandate that taxes be paid in the cryptocurrency. Similarly, the strongest possible driver for global adoption of a global reserve cryptocurrency would be global institutions that can force their will on most cross-border trade, mandating its use.
I'm glad that you brought that up, because that goes exactly into what I was saying about the economic policies determining what's going to happen. Yep, exactly.
You made me think of that, and I was like, I got to pull this up while we're talking again.
That's exactly what it is right there, because that's what it is. An economic policy is exactly a mandate. So if they're saying this is what's happening, this is the law, everybody has to do it. All right, there you go.
And if we understand, like you've helped explain, XRP is a great way to see it as more wholesale back end, XLM more retail front end, then we can understand that, hey, it could be the G7. Those are 7 central banks. That wholesale circle is complete, baby, right? And we know they could make that happen. All 7 largest economies of the world can benefit wholesale back end from settlement, and we've created a fire to really, after that mandate, for everybody to go get whatever's remaining off of those exchanges, because it's the only place you can find it, except to maybe potentially bid or what have you for what comes out every month on escrow. Right. Mm-hmm. So,
and one thing too, because there's also the OTC, but you got to remember, once and you probably actually already know this, but once the XRP starts drying up, the people that hold XRP are using it for their enterprise trade. So it becomes, the supply is just going to keep shrinking and shrinking and shrinking because they're using it.
Exactly.
So it's not like they're going to buy it and then release it back onto the market. They'll be doing trade with it, so it'll be in circulation, but they will be doing trade with their partners the same way that you'd be doing trade with dollars. It's not like it's just going on the exchange and, opening up the supply. It's going from business to business, conducting whatever trade internationally too, because it's gonna be used for a global trade. But it's the supply is gonna. And that's the thing. At some point, the entire supply is only going to be made up of whatever the exchanges have, whatever the banks are able to make money. Because that's the thing. The banks can make money, or the exchanges and banks can make money off of basically offering services and spreads and being able to do that. But and that's the thing. There's actually one more thing too that I wanted to say. So for one, there's going to be an absolute minority of XRP floating around in the public exchanges. But just so, and this actually might blow people's minds, I believe that XRP will be a minority token on the XRP ledger, meaning that there will be more other tokens than there are of XRP. There will be more bonds, more stocks, more derivatives, more currencies, more of every. XRP will be a minority of the minority token on its network. There will be so many other assets issued and transferred, and that's why this is also important, because it transfers through XRP. So in order to do that transfer, you need XRP to help conduct a transfer, because it's essentially the apex asset that connects the two assets. And so that's one thing to consider. Like XRP will be, and that's part of the reason why I believe in it, because it'll be a minority asset on its own ledger. Basically, if you're part of that minority, then you can essentially have access to any other asset on that ledger, to where if you're not part of that minority, you've got to redeem those assets for XRP to potentially try to interact. And part of this too is I think the banks are doing this too. I think there's going to be I think this may be a deal with all crypto, but there's going to be a tight constraint on global trade in which if you don't hold any of these tokens, you will not be able to be competitive in the space for global international trade. This is from me using the technology and me trying to build my applications off of as fast as I can, because I truly believe at some point that it'll be so hard to be able to compete in the space for international trade, because all the banks would have gobbled it up, all the companies that can afford to buy it up at whatever. That's like, they don't care about the price; they're going to use it, so they'll buy it up at whatever price. Meaning that if you were able to get it in, let's say at $1 now, and you're able to, let's say you bought 1,000, it goes up to whatever price, you may have a lot more liquidity, to where if you have to buy one for 1,000, well, you got to spend so much more money to be able to have the liquidity needed to conduct your trade, and you'll be a minority in the space already. So it becomes you're already at a disadvantage, because the people that came to the space early are going to be conducting all of the trade, and in order to even compete in the space, you have to buy the XRP from them, the ones that aren't typically going to sell it because they're using it for trade. So it becomes this, and that doesn't mean they're not going to sell it. It just means that they're not going to sell it at whatever price you're going to try to list it, and the price is going to keep on going up until they decide, okay, this is economic advantageous for me to sell it. And this is what's going to drive the supply. It's going to be the supply is going to be dried up and shriveled. It's going to be shriveled up because of the overall amount of technical use case you could have for international trade among enterprises.
To keep building on that point, one of the other things I think about all the time, and I have this conversation all the time with Big Skinny and others, and I'm going to show this one more time here. When we think about what the point that you just made here, we go back to line 82, right? We understand that the Ripple Accelerator program, it is not a guess. They pre-allocated and allocated this stuff in option contracts to other companies in different areas of industry, just like they did with R3. So when we understand that, we understand we don't have the clarity currently. I come back to the notion, Quincy, of if I'm a central bank and I have a separate holding company, let's say, that's holding this option contract of what I'm going to eventually use, and it's formulated based on what my daily payment flows will be and projected use over the next however many years, whatever that formula is, I'm not incentivized to use it today, even if I have clarity in my country. Because the U.S. doesn't have clarity yet, and that's the largest economy in the world, right? And if I want to use this asset, right, I don't want to use it at $10 if I'm a central bank. I want to use it because I know it's going to be 1,000 or 10,000, because I know the top 7 or the top 20 have already got a closed loop, because we know that they're building CBDCs on the XRP Ledger open source technology. Come on in.
And one thing you may end up seeing too, because I don't doubt that banks are using it, but they may end up using it for internal accounting mechanisms to essentially wait for the liquidity to come into play to bring it into the over landscape of interacting with other banks too. Because like I said, why would they want to basically be using the full utility of it at $1 if they knew they could use a broader utility of it with more liquidity in the market by having it be at a higher price? But at the same time, you could still get that functional utility by using it as an accounting mechanism on your own platform. So if I was a bank and I was sending money between accounts within my own bank, I could use XRP for that and be able to have that instant accounting right there and not worry about it without having to essentially give up the XRP. And you see, like exactly what you said is right on the ball. Like,
because you think about that, and that leans into the idea too of, well, when they do get this clarity, or whenever the right entity blesses this thing, I see a big push to soak it up off the exchanges as quick as possible. And it may be one of those situations like you hinted to earlier, Quincy, where it starts to dawn on people. Like, you see a regular push in action and price action, but once it really starts to dawn on these entities out here, hey, wait a minute, like this is our time to get it, because we can see now that the clarity's coming. Like you said, if there is like a months and months and months, and we see us rolling towards this thing and not a 1 week and everything you need's right here, This is where you're going to see that gradual push over a 3-6 month period or whatever it happens to be, where it starts to dawn on everybody, hey, we are getting this clarity and we better get whatever's left, because we're going to spend it when it's 4 and 5 digits, when we can get the full scale benefit from it and not get rid of it when it's 50 cents.
You got to remember too, because you got the exponential problem, or not exponential problem, but you got the exponential factor of, like, let's say you had 10 companies that were operating in a space and only one of them used XRP. Well, it wouldn't be like advantageous for any of the other ones to use XRP because only one of them used XRP. But if one of them use XRP, then 2 of them use XRP, then 3 of them use XRP. Well, then if the other ones want to interact with that one, then they use XRP, and then more of them use it. And then it becomes, even the ones that are coming in after the fact aren't even really coming in for the XRP. They're coming in to do business with the people that are using the XRP, and they need the XRP to help conduct business. And you're going to see more of a cascading effect, because the more the network grows, the more people that need to be on the network, the more people that aren't on the network that used to operate with people that are currently on the network now need to buy XRP to operate with those people that are now on the network now. And it's going to cause a cascading effect.
And don't you feel like, with where we are in this moment, with the lack of clarity and the lawsuit, first of all, it's only alleged that they are unregistered securities. There's no actual judgment. But the exchanges immediately stepped away, right, and have stopped selling, either delisting or just halted trading, whatever you have it, however they've done it there. What happens? I mean, look, we saw it go to 192 while this was going on, right? I mean, what happens when we go to $5-6? We start to see a settlement maybe at the end of the year, or even before then, or a summary judgment early next year or something. And are we going to see this move to an accredited investor status buying? Is this really part and parcel with this lawsuit to begin to phase out the retail investor, the noisy part of the market, and pivot towards the institutional back end where it was really intended for?
I'm not entirely sure, but so one thing I would say, and something to consider, exactly what you just said. So one thing, and this is the main reason why I tell people, retailers, especially American retailers, I don't really know, like if you're in Japan or Brazil, you probably, who cares?
Yeah.
But if you're in the United States, the reason why I say this is retail traders create speculative bubbles. And XRP is going to be used as a trade medium. So let's just use this example, right? Let's say I was a company and I was trading $10 a day with XRP. And I'm making, I have one XRP, it's worth $10, and I'm making trades with it. And let's say, speculators go on a retail frenzy and they make it go from one XRP being worth $10 to one XRP being worth $25. Well, that's cool for me. Now I can do $25 with the trade. But what happens if it slams back down and comes down to $7? Well, it totally disrupt my ability to conduct consistent trade. So there's every reason in the book to get retail traders out, because all they're going to do is create speculative bubbles in essentially a currency that needs to be used for consistent trade. Now, that part of the problem too is the price is so low. So because the price is so low and there's so little liquidity in the market, the price can be moved all over the place. So that's another reason why the price needs to be high, so the volatility is low, because it takes more and more money in the market to potentially move that price. So that's right. I don't know if this is some part of some who knows what to get retail traders out, but I do know that you have every incentive to get retail traders out, because it creates speculative bubbles, and you don't need speculative bubbles for a trade medium, because then you can't have consistent trade.
I speak to this all the time, Quincy. It's such an amazing point you just made. I speak to this a lot, especially last year. We went on about it a lot. If you can't get rid of that volatility and guarantee these large central banks and settlement clearing houses and derivative settlement and all these companies that reliable price, then what is the point of using what you have at all? I could just stay in dollars. I could stay in gold or whatever else I wanted to use that's volatile and moves around throughout the day, right? So that's where it comes into me with bringing assets, bringing all these different, look, it's about bringing all the derivatives, bonds, stocks, everything else, all the commodities, all the money around the world digitized, and all the real estate, because then you can settle balancing off of all of these things for one transaction in a very even balanced way, so we never overexhaust any one particular corridor for settlement. Then you start to get into how we find a price floor or a price set, because some people even think, and I've thought for a long time, we may see some kind of a price set even.
Oh yeah, just
on
like
the
you saw with
asset.
gold in like the 30s or 40s, was it? You saw a price set?
Absolutely.
Might be in the 50s. I'm not sure exactly on the date, but yeah,
Absolutely.
that's actually where people get that idea that they may commandeer the XRP because they commandeered gold back after the Great Depression.
Absolutely. And I feel like, something of that nature, even if it's like letting the asset still roam free, right? I mean, or you could let the asset XRP, which would be the underlying asset, run free and issue a price set stable coin for the banks to use off of this said asset, right? And have it released off of there. Some kind of which way, however they go to use this thing, I do believe that the price has to be extremely reliable, because I don't want to commit to holding 1 million, 5 million of these things for my daily payment flows and have it be worth $100 one day and $105 5 minutes later, and then $97 3 minutes later. It's like this does not a solution make, right? I don't
think you're going to see any of these cryptocurrencies used as a backend. I mean, you can see them used as a functionality, but used as a widespread backend settlement platform until you see the volatility subside under 2%. And I don't know if it's 2% daily, 2% weekly, but it needs to be predictable. That's really the case of it. It doesn't really matter if there's a level of volatility. It just needs to be predictable. That's why people like gold so much. It's volatile, it moves around, but it's relatively predictable.
Absolutely. No, it's well said. So, I mean, all of this is extremely interesting. And look, I mean, Quincy, this has been amazing connecting with you. I mean, I talk to you, I feel like I've known you my whole life, man. I really do. It's just been a really pleasure being able to sit down and speak with you, and I hope you'll come back.
It's been a pleasure too. Like I said, I love watching your content. I even love more talking to you. Like I wish I could do this every day. Like this is awesome.
We'll have to do it. We'll make it weekly.
Yeah, I would love to do this again. I would love to. Maybe we when I get things settled down with a lot of these interviews, I might space them out a little bit. But we should definitely have more of a consistent conversation of not only the broader economics, but even some of the functions that people are using these for, because that's the fundamentals,
Yes, it is.
I love it. Like I love it. I think your viewers would love it too. I think my viewers would love it.
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, before we get out of here and wrap this thing up, Quincy, tell them the name of your Twitter and your YouTube channel. And by the way, I'm going to put your YouTube channel in my comment section for everybody, and I'm asking everybody right now to go support you and give you a follow.
Yeah, my Twitter is Quincy Chilbro, and my YouTube is Coin Club Crypto. Come check me out. We go over some general tech videos, talk about the broader technology, use cases, how you'd use it, what you'd use it for, and my Twitter is just full of memes and shit posts. So
yeah, and I'll tell you, your YouTube channel videos, I've gone through and checked out a handful of them, and the way you are able to communicate to the common investor who's not a coder like myself, I'm very grateful for you, Quincy, because I've not seen somebody with that kind of grace and skill of communication since Bob Way from Ripple. So I'm very glad that you're here with us.
I'm honored.
I'm serious. I'm very serious, and I'm very glad that you're here, because I think you're going to help bring a lot of knowledge and clarity to people to understand exactly what we hold. And you know how we say it all the time here, you got to know what you hold. Right? You got to know what you hold. Quincy, thank you so much, man.
Thank you so much. I very much enjoy being on here. I want to have more conversations like this, and I want the broader community to have more conversations like this, because I just like anybody else, I would love to see any of these assets just go through the roof. But look, you're going to see adoption occur over time. It's going to take, who knows, there's really no, and actually I might even make a tiny little statement here. So when I spoke to Zinfin too, they follow everything, and they think a lot of the stuff in the space is kind of hilarious, because people will be speculating off of oh, this tiny little thing over here, and they're like, yeah, that is not happening in a million years. But the biggest thing is there is going to be an adoption curve of these technologies. There will be, and it comes down to whether you believe in the technology or not. I can't tell you to just do it to do it. You need to go do your research first, and then find a technology that you believe in. But if you believe in the technology, there will be an adoption curve. There will be, and that's the thing, I'm not saying it'll be your technology, it'll be some of these technologies, but there will be an adoption curve. So just find a technology you like, that you believe in, study up on it, get educated, look at some of the macroeconomic use cases, and maybe some people that are actively using it, and just relax.
Well said, Quincy Jones. Thank you, my brother. I appreciate you so much for being here, man. We'll talk offline. Don't go anywhere just yet.
Okay.
All right, stay tuned. And there you have it. I want to say thank you again to Quincy Jones and all of you for checking out the interview. And I want to remind you right now to check out all the links in the description box and the comment section. Look, whether it's Pure VPN to help hide your anonymity online, whether it's crypto tax audit from Clinton Donnelly and you're not sure how to handle your crypto taxes, or whether it's iTrust Capital and the best IRA, crypto gold silver IRA on the planet, or all the other products and services that I use each and every day out here in this space. Remember, they are trusted, vetted links. The bigger this space gets, the more the scammers come onto the scene. And a public service announcement, I will never ask you for money. I will never tell you that I use WhatsApp, because that's what the imposters use. So make sure you know, if you see any of that, you always report it. They are trusted, vetted links for each and every one of us. And I will appreciate you all being here, and I will catch all of you on the next one.